Hello, welcome to my channel. Another bibliophile reads. My name is Greg, and this is my weekly reading update, ending at 7:16. Now, I'm going to admit that this was not a very heavy reading week. I got very little done. I have some excuses. My audiobook listening is way down because the weather here in Virginia has just been dreadful. You walk outside and you are suddenly drenched. It feels like 1,000 St. Bernards are breathing on you all at once. So instead of going for an outdoor walk, usually about 45 minutes to an hour, I go to the lodge, my community lodge, where they have an indoor track. And I do a loop around the track for about 30 minutes. And even though I could go longer, being inside and confined, it does not induce me to walk for longer periods of time. So my listening time on audiobooks has gone way down. And just the regular heat seems to be wearing me down a bit. I also took a day trip to an island in the Chesapeake Bay, a very small island that is slowly disintegrating. This island will not be around in 50 years. It is inhabited by maybe 400 people, mostly watermen who make their living fishing the blue crabs, and there are regulations restricting the number of crabs they can take in right now because the population of the crab is not doing so well. But still, a day trip prevented me from reading that day. So, what have I actually finished? I finished The Wall by John Hersey. And you'll notice that I am holding up the paperback edition of this, even though I listened to the audiobook version. Now, this is quite a lengthy book. This is 636 pages long. So it took me a good while to get through this on an audiobook. And this is an historical novel, or maybe not quite historical because it was written in 1950 about the events during Poland, Warsaw, during World War II. And this is when the Jews were rounded up and stuck into a ghetto. And it is just a devastating little novel. The characters are fictional, but the plot, or should I say, the setting, is very real. The events that occurred to these characters happened to someone, maybe not exactly the way Hershey describes it, but it was happening there. And as the Jews were put into the ghetto, they started having quotas. And the Germans were saying, you need to deliver 1,000 Jews per day to be exported out of the ghetto. And the Jews knew what was going. They knew what was going on. They knew that these people were being sent to their death. And as they struggle to survive, they start thinking, why are we placid? Why do we just let this happen to us? So they start forming underground cells to fight back, to barter and trade and steal guns and other weapons, to fight back. And they had some success. They were not entirely successful, of course, because that is not history. But you have to wonder about the fighters in these ghettos who decided that they're just not going to take it. They're going to try to survive the best they can against impossible odds. Now, this book is written as diary entries. There is a character, Nathanson, who is apparently like the editor who gathered up all these diary entries together and made them into a book, which he hid from the Germans because he was a scholar, and his main purpose in life was to write and to record, and he had to hide his writings from the Germans. It makes it sound like it's supposed to be nonfiction, even though it is fiction. I found that a very interesting little twist. As for the characters, the characters are fine. There's no real standout characters. I'll say there's one. There's Rachel Apt. She was a Jewish woman, and she was known to be quite homely. And she was put in charge of one of these cells because they figured a homely woman had less to lose than a pretty woman. Rachel Apt could lead the men in the groups of cell to attack the Germans. And I enjoyed it. I'm not going to say this is a great book to read, but it is interesting history because of this uprising truly did happen. And it inspires me to read this book by Leon Uris, Milia 18. And this is another novel about the ghetto uprising in Warsaw. And this book was published in, let's check what date, 1962. So this is published 12 years later. And I want to see another version of the ghetto uprising. I want to see a different set of characters through a different author's perspective and just see what I think about it, because I find that situation they were in just captivating. It's something I want to learn more about. The other book that I read was a bit of a surprise. This is The Dirty Dozen for E.M. Nathanson. I read this for BookTube at War. And The Wall was also read for BookTube at War. I read that for Poland and the Jewish experience. I picked The Dirty Dozen out to read about the American experience during World War II. And I sort of got that. But again, this book was a surprise. I was expecting an action-oriented book because I just thought that was going to be. The main plot of this is that there are 12 convicts convicted for robbery, murder, rape, that sort of thing. And they have been sentenced to death. And they are given the opportunity to redeem themselves, to have that death penalty repealed. But they must go on a secret mission for the military. And they must train as a military unit. So I thought this book was going to be, first couple of chapters, introduce the characters, see through their training, and then go on this massive adventure, this plot to take down Germany. That's not really what I got. What I got was a work of literature, because the author takes his time and he introduces the characters in the way that you would introduce them in a normal literary novel. You're introduced to the main character. He's Jewish, and that sort of surprised me at first, because I didn't go into this doing any research. But you have a Jewish man training these convicts, and these convicts, you have a black lieutenant who has committed a murder. You have a Native American man who has committed a murder. You have another man, he's American, and he's Myron, and he killed a woman, although he swears up and down that he's innocent, that he did not commit the murder. And you have the other 12. And so you go through this book. This book is 541 pages long. You don't even get to their mission till after page 500. The mission is not what is important about this book. What is important is knowing their characters, knowing their motivations, and what happens to them. I will talk a bit about the black lieutenant. His name was White. And there was an incident early in the book where he was walking out from a night out, and there were some junior officers, and they started race baiting him, and he was seething inside. But some military police, the MP, came by and sort of defused the situation. Although that inner seething did not go away for Lieutenant White. And then he came upon one of the lower ranking people who were baiting him, and he killed him. So yes, White is guilty, but he is a black man, and he is college educated, which at that time, this had been 1944, was kind of a rarity. And I found his character really sort of interesting because he thinks a lot. Because once he gets to his training camp, they are training outside a British manor that is only inhabited by one very snooty British woman. And they're not supposed to go into their manor. Her manor is supposed to be off limits, but you know they get in there anyway. And she has a book, and the book is called, and I'm going to be nice to the algorithm because it'll hate me for saying this book, The African American of the Narcissus by Joseph Conrad. And Lieutenant White is kind of disturbed by that title. He knows Joseph Conrad really isn't the race baiters that he encountered, but it still disturbs him. And this was a book written in 1965. So there is that depth, that psychological depth to these characters that I truly enjoyed. So that is The Dirty Dozen. However, in the ebook version, because I read about a third of this in the paperback, and the print size just got on my nerves, so I went out and bought the ebook version. Now, at the time the ebook version was released in 2008, the whole Kindle revolution was happening, and The Dirty Dozen was out of print. And the author decided, I'm going to republish this on my own in Kindle because I own the rights. And he had an epilogue about how the book came to be written. And apparently, this was going to be a work of nonfiction when he first started it, because he's heard a story from a filmmaker who went out to England in 1944. And this was early 1944. This would have been in February 1944, that this supposed filmmaker came across a training camp of 12 convicts being trained for a secret mission. And they're called the Dirty Dozen. And they're called the Dirty Dozen because, at least in the novel, during training, they refuse to shave or wash because they still feel like they're being discriminated against as convicts. Well, anyway, the author, Nathanson, tried to find the real life Dirty Dozen and could not find the facts that they existed. So he wrote this as a novel, even though supposedly there truly was a Dirty Dozen. And who knows, maybe there was a Dirty Dozen that got buried under the military, paperwork. Because at the end of this book, you see it very clear that the military wants to disown this mission. I like this. I don't know if it's a great book, but it's a fascinating book. And that's all that I read last week. So, what am I going in to this week? Am I currently reading? I am supposed to be reading this book for a group read, a read along. I got about 30, 40 pages in. My brain was going, I'm just not into this book. So I'm going to put this aside and start it up again in a week or two, probably with the audiobook version. So to help cleanse my palate, I picked up this. I'm about halfway through Tales from the Crypt. These are 1950s horror comics. That's all I'm going to say for now. I'm also reading this. No, I'm not Criminale, but this is one of Criminale's favorite series. Then later this week, I have to pick up this book. This is The Right Side by Spencer Quinn. This is for my real life book group that's going to be meeting next week. I don't know a whole lot about this book other than it's a contemporary novel. It is about a woman who served in the military who got the right side of her face was severely disfigured in an accident. And she has, in her recovery, a dog. So I think this is just going to be a dog book. But that is my reading report for July 16th. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.